Essentially, I taught myself. After that, I always bought and sold things. I wanted to open a pawn shop like my dad did with his small coin shop. Rick Harrison just told fans something they never wanted to hear. Adam is no longer there. When Chumlee goes to jail, everything he worked so hard to build falls apart. The Pawn Stars company used to be a huge source of wealth, but now it's in a lot of trouble. How did things go from being rich and famous to this terrible tragedy? Listen in as we find out why the famous pawn shop is going to close soon. Price of fame in a pawn shop. Pawn Stars wasn't just another show. Hard work, drive, and Rick's strong guts helped it grow. His tough businessman father taught him the trade. He knew how to turn junk into gold. When the store first opened, it was all about the deals, the bargaining, and finding out about the thing's past lives. But as soon as the cameras came in, that strong base began to crack. Not even the Harrison family was able to avoid the changes that fame can bring. Before we go any further, it's clear that Pawn Stars' popularity didn't come without a cost, and what happened next will blow your mind. Even though business was great, things were getting bad behind the scenes. There were more and more lawsuits and arguments over money, and family members began to turn against each other. The store had lost a lot of money before the plague. They were barely able to get by without the millions of dollars they used to make. If you look at all the big pawn shops in this town, they're all owned by big chains. Like Easy Corp has about 1,000 shops, Cash America has about 1,000. Walmart was too strong for me to beat. It hit like a freight train. There is nothing worse than being a dad and seeing your son's future go away. But for Rick, this was just one more problem after a long list. Then there's Chumlee, who is a likable jerk on screen but always makes bad choices off-screen. Police broke into his house and found shocking things inside. He had illegal drugs, guns that weren't registered, and enough proof to get him into a lot of problems. He avoided spending a lot of time in jail, but his image took a huge hit. Fans were shocked. How did this happen to the funny chill guy from TV? It doesn't end there. Rick's mother turned against him too. He was sued because she said he tricked her into giving up her business share while she was unconscious. That lawsuit asked for a full review into more than $500,000 in money. The family history was suddenly at odds with itself, while being hit by a car. That was tough, but we made it through. That room was very interesting. Remember that we had to cut out half of that room just to film it. 4 people were there. The seller, me, Rick Chumlee, and a person who did the music. Rick said he wasn't guilty, but the damage was already done. Even his mother thought he was bad. Even worse, Corey, the responsible one, had his own share of problems. Careless, since he was always angry and in trouble, he dragged the family name even deeper into the mud. It was getting worse. A damaged RV, missed bills, and fights in bars. This wasn't what the show said about a clean-cut businessman. Pawn Stars wasn't as much about finding rare items as it was about problems in real life. Let's not forget the experts who were on the show either. Some of them caused as much trouble as the family itself. One of them was caught being violent with a partner. Another was caught certifying fake sports memorabilia, which caused a scandal that shook the whole business. Fans could tell that the show was losing its authority. The show that used to be fun and educational about unique gems was becoming a reality TV disaster. Pawn Stars used to be interesting. There were a lot of shocks, and it felt real. But the magic started to slip away from Rick Harrison as the seasons went on. The times that just happened? Gone. Too much polish and staging made everything feel fake. The talks weren't so much about the thrill of the deal as they were about back and forths that always went the way you thought they would. And the family trouble? Things that made the show fun in the first place were pushed to the background by that. Rick didn't just stand there, though. He had big plans. One of them was Pond Plaza, a shopping center he built next to the shop to help him grow his business beyond the TV show. But this business move failed, as many do when they try to be too big. Rick was blamed by the companies inside for not advertising the area well enough. He was then sued, and whatever plans he had for the place turned out to be just another failed attempt to make money off of his fame. At the same time, the show kept going slowly, but not even the biggest fans could deny it. Pawn Stars wasn't the same as it used to be. One bad move at a time, the kingdom became less strong. Rick was aware that the show would end soon. He tried everything to keep his wealth, putting money into real estate and other businesses in the hopes that something would work. The store had seen everything. Many wins, many loses, and everything in between. But now, deals were beginning to seem strange. Each seller was sure they had something valuable, but when they got there, they were met with cold truth. They thought they would make a lot of money, but not everything was worth what they thought it was. The person who walked in with what looked like a normal British 10-pound note should be taken when history meets hard deals. It wasn't just any bill, though. Well-known street artist Banksy had left his mark on it. The seller thought he had gold on his hands. Who was the old man? He really wasn't buying it. At first look, all he saw was broken cash that wasn't worth anything. They fought back and said that Banksy's art was worth thousands of dollars. It didn't make the old man happy, so he brought in an expert. It turned out to be real Banksy art, though not the rare kind. At most, it's worth a few $100s. Someone who came in hoping to make a lot of money set a goal of $500. Who was the old man? Not a chance. In the end, the seller got $400 after a lot of tough bargaining. It's not terrible, but it's not the jackpot he thought it would be. Then, there was the Navy man. There was an old sextant on his person. It had been used on the USS Hector, a repair ship during World War II. The man told stories, and the old man liked learning about war history. But let's be honest, who uses a sextant to find their way anymore? The seller asked for almost $400. The old man, who was always good at negotiating, gave him $200 instead. The seller fought back, but it was clear what was going on. People who wanted to collect this kind of thing weren't really waiting in line. They chose to stay at $265. That sounds good, right? Can you go $260, $265? I would be fine with $265. Corey, give him the $2.65. I'm going to send it. Fair payment, but not the huge sum of money the seller had hoped for. Someone else came in with an old black and white panoramic picture of a Las Vegas airport during World War II. Even though it looked and sounded cool, was it really worth anything? In their mind, that is. He was sure it would sell for at least $500. The old man didn't even move. Things aren't important just because they're old. He said that history buffs might like it, but that didn't mean it would sell a lot of copies. The seller held on to hope and placed a counteroffer of $400. The old man stayed cold and threw out a measly $100. The shocked seller tried to get a better price, but it didn't work. He left the store still holding on to his priceless photo. He learned the hard way that in the pawn world, emotional value doesn't pay the bills. Then came the real thing, a savage Navy gun from the Civil War. It didn't happen often. It looked strange. The vendor was aware that he had something unique. He began very rich, $1,800. The old man wasn't biting. He called in a gun expert who said it was real and told him why it wasn't exactly a hit back in the day. Even for its time, it wasn't the most useful tool because it was big, awkward, and heavy. Collectors would love it, but they could only do so much. The expert thought it was worth no more than $2,000. The seller still hoped to make a lot of money, but the old man wasn't interested in paying too much. His offer was $800. The seller was about to choke. $800! Not at all. As a response, he pushed back hard and said $1,250. $800, Rick. That's not going to happen. I think it would be more like $1,250, though. I really am. What? It was my hope to get around $1,800 for the gun. I believe we need to leave that place now. The old man wouldn't move. They went back and forth. After a lot of back and forth, the deal finally closed at $1,400. The old man knew he had the upper hand as he walked away, even though the seller did pretty well. If you go into a pawn shop with what you think is a gold mine, you'll leave with a big dose of reality. That's the harsh truth about collecting and selling things. When money is on the line, the thrill of a rare thing can wear off quickly. Ask the person who thought he was worth a lot of money because his New York Yankees baseball from 1951 was signed. When I first heard about it, it sounded like the right find for any sports fan. A ball that famed players like Mickey Mantle and Joe DiMaggio have signed? That ought to be worth a lot of money. Not so quickly. The paper on it was fading, and the item wasn't backed up by any papers. Anyone who buys things knows that a name doesn't mean anything without proof. The old man who ran the store wasn't going to waste money, so he got help from a pro. How did it go? The ball was real, but it was in such bad shape that it wasn't worth much. It was the seller's hope to get $3,000. He left with the ball still in his hands after being offered $800, but he turned it down. Dreams aren't enough to pay the rent. Not all sellers were happy, though. Some brought in rare items that made deals tough and led to big shocks. The pawn shop was shocked by these items. Then, something that came from a nerd's dream happened. A Ghostbusters proton pack that was made at home with sound effects and lights that flash. This person was proud of without a doubt, any fan would jump at the chance to get it. $2,000 was asked for. The old man didn't like it. Nerd trinkets can sell, but only if they're real. A movie prop that was used on screen? That would be worth something. But a fan made a copy? Not really. The store owner made a firm offer of $1,000. The seller was unsure at first, but in the end agreed to the deal. He nearly certainly spent more than that on it, but he had money for his next project now. Then there was a huge, 6-foot-tall wooden figure of a Native American chief that stood out. The seller's grandpa owned a tobacco shop where the item had been sitting outside for decades. Value based on feelings? Yes. But in the world of business, that doesn't mean much. The seller asked for $900. The old man got back up with $400, barely able to keep a straight face. Then there was a tough fight of wills, but the old man wouldn't give up. He couldn't make a deal if he couldn't sell it for money. It worked out for them. The pawn shop has won again. The store felt more like an art museum some days. There were big names, big dreams, and even bigger letdowns. That person came in with what he said was a Picasso clay alvas. Back in the 1940s and 1950s, Picasso made a small run of many of these vases. Things aren't rare just because they're hard to get. The seller was still sure he had found gold. He was ready to sell the vase because he had kept it for more than 35 years. How much does he want? A brave $35,000. The pawn shop wasn't going to believe him, of course. A specialist came in to have a better look. The vase was real. It had all the right marks and stamps and was almost perfect. That's good news. The bad news? Online, the prices were all over the place. Some buyers had them for $61,000. However, that is only wishful thought. The real value on the market? No more than $25,000 at most. The pawn shop made a deal. $15,000. It made the seller laugh. The talks took a long time. Both sides didn't want to blink. They agreed on $17,000 in the end. That's pretty good for an old vase that had been sitting around for decades. Another Picasso piece shows up just when you think you've seen everything. This time it's a picture from the 1950s that's been framed. It was said to be a rare piece called Goat Skull on Table that was one of only 150 copies made. A few years ago, an appraiser put the value at almost $119,000. The person selling it thought he could get $6,000 for it. It costs $19,500, so I believe $16,000 is a fair price. This is really cool. When does this piece of Picasso's work come from? He was 71 years old, born around 1953. That much money was too valuable for the pawn shop to risk without first consulting a professional. It turned out to be an aquatint drawing, a fancy word for it looked like a watercolor but wasn't painted by hand. Was it worth it? Yes, but worth $6,000? Not even close. $1,000 was the best deal they could make. The seller was unsure at first, but in the end agreed to the deal. A different Picasso was bought and sold, and the pawn shop got another expensive piece. At the shop, it was just another day when Inwalk came in with 6 etchings by Picasso from a special book. He asked for $5,000 because he possibly thought that having Picasso's name on them would make them instantly valuable. But here's the thing. Things aren't worth a lot of money just because Picasso made them. His work is worth a lot of money. While others only bring in a few hundred, the experts say the etchings were real. A very rare book called Lysostrata has this in it. The best part? Picasso himself signed the book. Everything changed when they signed it. A whole set might fetch $10,000. It might be worth more if it were sold in pieces. Rick wasn't going to give up $5,000 without a fight, though. In order to make more money, the seller tried to raise the price to $6,000. Rick finally gave in and gave over $6,000 after some back and forth. A new owner bought another set of Picasso pictures, and the seller got more than he thought he would. It's a win-win, right? Even though the Picasso show wasn't over yet, valuable art showed up just when it looked like the shop had seen it all. This led to some tricky deals and lessons that came as a surprise. A signature really does make all the difference. Not long after that, someone else came along with what he said was a Picasso picture from the Celestine collection from 1968. What's wrong? Not any forms. When it comes to art, not having the right paperwork is like trying to sell a car without the title. Big red flag. Rick got his trusted art expert to come take a look. The decision was in after looking at the quality of the paper, the plate marks, and the overall condition. It was true. There was a catch, though, so don't get too excited. A lot of these were made by Picasso. The value wasn't really through the roof without his name either. Let's take a moment to talk about the real world. There are times when things are not what they seem when you get or sell art. A lot of the time, people think that the price they paid for something is about right for what it's worth. In reality, though, that doesn't always happen. Perhaps I could have held on to it for a few more years, but, to be honest, I don't think things will get better for the market in the next 5 years. I hope I'm wrong. Especially when it comes to art bought on cruise ships. It happened exactly that way when a man came into the shop trying to sell a print that his family had bought years before. He thought he would get a good payout, but he was let down hard. The picture was worth between $2,000 and $3,000 on the market. Do you think that's a good amount? The seller's face quickly changed when he found out how much his family had paid in the first place. It was years ago, on a cruise ship, that they paid an unbelievable $9,000 for this print. That's 3 times what it's really worth. There was almost a sense of sadness in the air. Art has been sold at inflated prices at cruise ship sales for a long time. This was yet another case of someone falling into that trap. Rick didn't think twice because he is always looking for a deal. I think the seller was hoping for more than $1,500 when he made the offer. For a short time, the room was quiet. The seller looked like he was thinking about what to do because his family had lost a lot of money. He was pretty sure that he wouldn't be able to find anyone else willing to pay even close to what they had given him. He hesitated for a moment, then sighed, and took the money. No matter how bad it is, there are times when you just have to give up. But just when it looked like the store had no more Picassos left, another seller came in with not 1 but 2 pictures. The first one had a dove etched into it. The second one was called Poor Roby. These pictures were not like any other. Picasso himself made them. But here's the thing. Picasso made a lot of these over the course of his work. You may have heard of Pablo Picasso, even if you don't know much about art. He is one of the most well-known artists ever. He just recently sold a picture for more than $100 million. It doesn't mean that a piece is rare just because it's real. And when it comes to art, being rare is everything. Both prints were checked by a professional who proved they were real. Even though that was good news, it didn't mean they were valuable right away. There were a lot of copies of the dove etching because it was a mass-produced print. It could sell for $200 on its best day. Maybe a little more if the right buyer came along. That wasn't a huge amount of money, but Roby was different. This picture had promise. It was an